I'm sure know, is a response to Hannah Rosen's article in the Atlantic Monthly called The End of Men, which was really, I thought, an excellent article, provocative title, and she's a provocative thinker. But she really pulled together a lot of really interesting ideas that I thought were very well done. So I highly recommend her piece. But I think it's not really the end of men, but really the beginning of men. And I was so excited to do this. Brad asked me to do it sort of Phil Donahue style, and I said, I'm totally in for that. So this is like audience, jump in whenever you want. If you have a question, a pushback, if there's something you want to say, if you want to ask Brad in terms of his research, or John and Jerome something in terms of younger men in the workforce, have at it. So feel like this is live and ready to go. So it's forging a new path, and so I honestly believe that out of this session we may have a key idea or two. Brad and I are totally fired up about continuing this discussion. It seems like a hot moment in terms of where the world is with the he session or the man session or whatever you want to call it, and lots of changes in the world. So there may be some great new ideas sparked in this room, and we have incredible people. Kathleen Gerson's new book will be really great, and Courtney is a contributor to the Schreiber Report. She's got a perspective, or it may give us some great focus on really where we need to go. And hopefully toward the end we'll really talk in a more practical way about what does it mean for the workplace, and how you all think that we can move on this and take it out of the Atlantic and take it out of the blog space and into real live companies. This is a hugely positive conversation about the paths that lie in front of us, and I'll say them quickly because I don't think I need to convince anybody that it's a four-way win. That with men getting on the path, women are freed and supported to reach the highest levels. And we know that's still the biggest issue in terms of women fully being participative and society fully tapping women, is that at those highest levels of power, they're still sparse. You all mainly are still sparse in numbers. And the ones who make it generally have either made choices in their life that they won't have children, or that they won't get married or whatever, or they've had supportive spouses. But the hard thing is in those years that John and Jerome are really in, where a lot of women make choices that move them off of a career path. The first part, to choose home as a career, that option is not open to men. If you asked 100 boys in elementary school, middle school, high school, how many of you are thinking of being a stay-at-home dad? I mean, how many hands do we think would be raised? Very few, but what an incredible career that some people choose to take full-time is extraordinary. So I see it as a win for those men. I see it as a win for men to not have to give up home life. But any way that we can help men to not have to completely segment their life, but lead a more unified and harmonious life, to me is a big win. Okay, third, for children, but you could also say the elderly. You could also, if you want, add pets or whoever, but children still active in my life, and for many of us, I put them up there, to get the caregiving they need over long stretches, that somebody could be home for 6 weeks, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, really do that kind of bonding, and not have two people both rush back to work and miss that time that we know is hugely important. Last, of course, increasing work, productivity and loyalty, where people are embraced, they're seen as whole people, etc. Right? So, let's start. Are work-life issues relevant? And we'll ask about this from men's perspective. So, many women in the room, some men. The question for your clickers to start is, what percentage of men today see work-life issues as having a high degree of personal relevance to them? So about 13% of you think only a quarter of men, 40% of you think a quarter to half of men see it as highly relevant, 40%, and only 8% of you think 3/4 or more of men. The question here is, how many men want an equal share of the child rearing role? What do you think about that? And of course, that doesn't include the household stuff either, right? We've kind of phrased it in the happy way. So what percentage of men expecting children in 2010 aspire to an equal share of child rearing responsibility? So no such a thing. 7% think that 3/4 of men. The biggest number, obviously, is 38%, 3 out of 8, think that somewhere between a half and 3/4. And so 45% of you think half or more want that share, and 60% of you, am I doing my numbers right? 54%, excuse me, are on the bottom side. 54% of you think men want less than half. with 22% saying only a quarter. So a quarter of you think only a quarter of men would want that. How many consider being stay-at-home? So what percentage of men were expecting children in 2010, whose wives are expecting? Do you think seriously consider being a stay-at-home dad? Holy smokes! Wow, that was easy. No wonder you guys threw them down. Okay, Brad, 2 questions here. You know, the one before, how many really want an equal share of the child-rearing responsibilities? And then this one, seriously think about being stay-at-home. Do you want to talk about the research and what you found?
Yeah, our study was a limited sample. It was 33 dads who almost all had full-time working spouses. And I would say that when we asked them to sort of rate themselves in terms of, you know, how well are they doing in terms of carrying out their caregiving responsibilities, almost invariably the first kind of throwaway line before they answered the question was, "You mean compared to my wife?" Pause, you know. And we say, "Sure, compared to your wife, how do you think you're doing?" And a lot of them gave themselves pretty positive scores. They said
lied.
They lied. Men lie. They tended to give themselves scores that averaging around 4 on a scale of 1 to 5. Okay. And when we asked, you know, do you think that you're doing an equal share? The vast majority of them said no. But a lot of them said, but that's the aspiration. That's what we're trying to do. And one of the things that was clear, we did try to interview men. The average age of the kids was only 11 months old. So they're very young children. But we did try to make sure we talked to the men after the wife had returned to work. But one of the reasons I think that that 50 was more of an aspirational number than it was the reality was, of course, you know, you could say, well, it's a gender thing. But I think part of it too was that, you know, and one of the clear distinctions between women's experiences and men is that women are immersed in motherhood not for 2 weeks or 4 days, but for 2, 3, 4, 6 months, whatever it might be. And so they start to, you know, obviously take on those responsibilities on a full-time basis, and men never really have that opportunity to do so. The second question around the percentage of dads who really considered stay-at-home. All of the fathers said they considered it, but only 2 of them said they gave it any serious consideration.
2 out of 33.
2 out of 33.
Said they were serious.
Right. The primary reason that most of them gave was financial. Okay? So a lot of them would say, we just simply could not afford to live without 2 incomes, or, as is the case when I said at the opening, although women are graduating from college and graduate school in greater numbers than men, oftentimes they're still entering into spheres of the economy which pay women's wages versus men's wages. You know, service jobs, education jobs, caring positions, which pay less. So for some of the men, it was not only could we not live on one income, but we certainly can't live on hers because she works in education. The other reason, though, that came up less frequently but clearly was, I'm not sure what my peers, what my family, what my parents would think about me if I ever took that you know, that stance or that move. And so there was a feeling of discomfort about the way they would be perceived. And that discomfort, I think, is mirrored not only in this, but in the statistic that I think even now, the latest census said that 97% of stay-at-home parents are women.
When my wife was Attorney General 13 years ago, and I did a lot of the schlepping with the kids to school, a lot of times I didn't know where to stand on the playground, and it was all women, and I just wasn't sure waiting what to do with myself. I was taking Jack to the orthodontist 2 weeks ago. There were 7 men in the waiting room. I want to say something about that because I think it anticipates a really good question, which is we have been so gender-based about the way we see things. And we associate things with mothers like that, all that planning stuff. But if we put a different lens on, like a competency lens that we would have from work, I'm a Myers-Briggs INFP, I'm a healer, a nurturer, the rest of them. My wife's a field general, EMTJ, so even though I'm the lead person at home, she's the field general, and she's much better at planning and executing that. And frankly, that's a really good balance. It doesn't have a thing to do with, well, it does have a thing to do because of socialization, that she still does some of the things her mom did, and I still do some of the things my dad. It's not like there isn't a gender thing, but there's a potential to shift to who really is the planner in the house. And why don't we have the one who plans well at work be the one who plans, and let the idealist or the nurturer or whatever do the things that they do. Conversely, I should have been the one with the kids at home in the beginning. I didn't have the plumbing, but I had the patience to sit forever, to be interrupted, to read a book, to not have to feel like I was accomplishing something, because I could be in the moment and stare at my baby or anything and feel like it was meaningful. But I never thought of that at the time. And I want to say one more thing about that in terms of asymmetry, then I'm going to move on a little, is I think it's interesting that two progressive gentlemen in a new age had the discussion when their wife raised it as they, and I assume your wife, your fiance, your girlfriend raised the issue. I'm guessing that both of their fiancés had thought about the issue at 15, 16, 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, talked about it with other men before that. So there's a real asymmetry, I think, that we need to be questioning from very early on, which is whose choice is this, whose decision. Obviously, women have to bear the child and all that goes with that, but they don't have to bear everything else. And having our men, our boys, start to think about that early on might be a great thing.
We're having fewer children. We're spending more intensive time with them when they're young, and then we have these long, productive lives ahead of us. And I think if we can convince employers that not just for families, but for the labor force and for their organizations, the best thing they can do is be flexible and retain those workers by seeing a career as a long-term, flexible process, and not just, I have to prove how dedicated I am today in order to have my job tomorrow. We can focus more on what workers produce rather than how much time they prove to you that they're working. I think that will liberate men as well as women.
There is a book just out by Joan Williams, who teaches at Hastings School of Law in California. I just had her on my show, and she says, in response to your question, that there is a penalty for women, that it's not a women's issue, but it's a mom's issue, a caregiver issue, and that women pay a high price when they become caregivers. And the bad news is the same is true for men, and even worse, she says, that when they play active roles in caregiving, the view of them at work is diminished, connecting, I think, to that ideal worker idea. What do you think is the best time to engage men on the challenge and opportunities of an expanded sense of their opportunity responsibility? After your question, Carol, whether 2 or 3 when your son on the playground. But I guess in terms of impact, would you say it's A, before high school, B, during high school, C, during college or college age? D, approach them when they're expecting a child, or E, approach them when their children are young? What's the best time to get men to play the game, to be part of the game in terms of workplace flexibility and work-life balance? And Katie says, wow, 58% before high school and 24% during high school, so 82%. Really thinking we need to engage people early. I could not agree more with that. I just think it's so important to begin the conversation. What messages make the most sense in approaching and motivating men to step up to the challenges and opportunities of an expanded sense of opportunity and responsibility? Brad and I are really interested in this. How do we start to get at people? And here are some thoughts. We made them up. They didn't come from anywhere but Brad and Danielle and I thinking about it. Talk about what their fathers missed, and they don't have to. My dad, who missed lots of stuff. Talk about a new male hero accomplisher. So stay within that little paradigm that 2 or 3-year-old had. I'm going to take care of you, to have some new paradigm of what a male hero looks like. C, talk about economic realities or potentiality of female earners. D, talk about fairness in life, and that there's we ought to have fairness. And E, talk about men's opportunity for fullness or wholeness, as women did in the women's movement. Opportunity, 57% of you thought opportunity, and tied were C and D. Talk about a new, can you slide that over so we can remember, Katie, what's behind that? Talk about a new male hero accomplisher, talk about economic realities.